All right, welcome back, Joseph P. Farrell, to Red Eyes Radio. It's very good to have you with us. It's been 3 years, I think, 2007. We had you with us last time now, and you've been working and putting out books almost every year since that time. And I mean, when we had you with us last time, we talked about a little bit about the Giza Death Star series. We talked about Reich of the Black Sun, the SSR Brotherhood of the Bell, and also the Cosmic War. But since that time, you've released Secrets of the Unified Field. You've released the Philosopher's Stone. You've released Roswell and the Reich, and also, obviously, the latest one is called Babylon's Banksters. You've been keeping busy. Joseph, tell us a little bit about your latest book, and if there's any connection to that one, Babylon's Banksters, in terms of some of the previous books that you've been writing, as I see, as a kind of a series, if you will.
Well, thanks for having me back on, Henrik, and you're right. All of my books are intentionally conceived to be interconnected, even the ancient books with the Nazi series and vice versa, because the real story that I'm getting at here in all of these books is that there is a kind of hidden or off-the-books physics that once lay behind the achievements of ancient civilizations, and I think to a certain extent motivated some of the mystery schools and secret societies and fraternities and so on that were preserving this knowledge, although I grant the proposition that they were doing so probably without knowing the full implications of it. But this is the real intention of my books. I plot out books about, I'd say 3 to 4 books in advance of the book I'm actually writing on at any given moment. So in other words, they all fall into kind of a predetermined order within an arch of books that exists, at least in my own mind. You know? But the books that you mentioned on the air now, Philosopher's Stone and Babylon's Banksters, those were definitely conceived as kind of a subunit within that arch, because what I'm trying to do is show the relationship between basic concepts in alchemy and certain concepts within modern physics. And additionally, what I begin to do in Babylon's Banksters is explore what I call the post-war activity of the elites that survive this cosmic war that I wrote a book about. So naturally, some of that activity is centered on finance, and I'm trying to show in that book the relationship between 2 basic physical models and then 2 basic financial models, because there is a deep, deep connection that most people don't really appreciate between physics and financial policy. And this relationship, incidentally, is very, very, very old. So if we look at what's going on in the world today, you know, I know that Europe is certainly having its problems, certainly the United States is having its problems. But we need to understand that the action of the political elites is largely the product of very hidden manipulations of what I'm calling the elites that survived this cosmic war. And essentially their game plan has not changed for millennia.
Well, it couldn't be more timely as well, obviously, considering that, you know, as you alluded to, the situation that most of the world anyway is going through financially right now. Was the worst of this latest incarnation of the economic situation that we're in beginning to unfold, you know, before you decided to write about this, or did you start the project much earlier than that?
Well, it's a bit half of one and 6 dozen of the other. You know, it's a little bit of both. I had the idea to do this kind of book about 4 to 5 years ago. In other words, it was one of the books I had plotted out in my arch of books back when I was writing SS Brotherhood of the Bell and then Secrets of the Unified Field, because what got me on to thinking about that, Henrik, was that in studying so much of what the Nazis were doing with their physics, it occurred to me that they were doing the same thing with their financial and monetary policy. In other words, they were creating basically an open systems set of financial rules, in that they had basically, under Hitler, had thrown out private monopoly central banking and its control over German currency. So in other words, they essentially returned to the same system of money that this country had under the 13 colonies, of states issuing money directly, debt-free, into circulation based on the surplus of goods and services within the national gross domestic product, which is, incidentally, what real money has always been.
Exactly.
You know, if we don't learn this one lesson, if we do not learn this one lesson, we will never, ever advance any further beyond this constant dialectical polarization within our political systems. And I don't care what the country is. It exists in every country in Europe. It exists in every country in North America and in Latin America. So in other words, if we do not understand that the game that bankers have played and pursued with great success through the millennia is to gain control of the issuance of a state's money. And when they do this, Henrik, we must understand that banks cannot really issue money at all. They can only loan money into circulation. In other words, they create principal, but they never create the money in circulation to pay off the interest on the principal. So in other words, the game is always such that there's never enough money in circulation to pay off a national debt, and debt under that system can only increase.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to me that Nazi Germany pursued this policy of state-issued money under Hitler. It's interesting to me that the Communist Chinese do it today. It is interesting to me that this was the system of money in use in this country prior to the American Revolution. Each of the 13 colonies basically issued its own currency. But if you study American history, and most Americans, Henrik, don't even know this aspect of their history, but if you study American history back in the colonial period, under that system, we had virtually full employment and very, very little inflation. And we had tremendous prosperity. And then, of course, the Bank of England stepped in and shut it all down. You know?
Yeah, great.
So what happened out of that was, of course, the American Revolution. You know? So it had a tremendous effect on our nation's history, but it's an aspect of history that has, in my opinion, been deliberately suppressed in history books within this country. But if you look at the history of most nations in the world, certainly in Europe, you find similar things going on. You have very clear assertions of the sovereignty of the crown to issue the currency of the state, but eventually bankers get their hands on a monopoly charter from various crowned heads within the various states of Europe and start issuing monetized debt rather than real money. Because again, a bank cannot issue real money. It can only loan money. So this is the problem I think that we're faced with, and it goes directly to, in turn, to the reason that I think we are faced with the environmental situation that we're faced with. Because if you have a closed system of finance, in other words, if you have a system that is being advocated by these banksters, and let's call them that because they are a mix